Hello, a big
Hi.
hello, I should say, from Sugar and Spice, Deepthi and I. We are back again with two lovely, lovely stories and hope you enjoy listening to them. It's been a while since we've come up with something, so we really thought hard and picked out these two. Yes, Deepthi?
Yeah, two Indian authors this time. We won't tell you much in detail about the authors, though you already know them. They're very popular authors, and these stories are very popular ones too. So we directly move on to our stories. The first one by Srija.
Yes. So let me start with the first one. This one is called The Lost Jewels, and it's by a very, very famous playwright, poet, music composer. I mean, the list is endless. Social reformer. I'm speaking about Rabindranath Tagore. And we all know that his style of writing is lucid and beautiful. And this is one story which I love by him. So, The Lost Jewels, it begins in a first person narrative. So it starts with the man saying, I was seated on the steps of the ghat, and the steps were cracked. Everything looked old, and in fact, the roots of the banyan tree had cracked the steps in several places. But I sat on the ghats looking out over the river, and while I was lost in thought, looking at the old house, the huge palatial house in front of me on the opposite side, I was suddenly disturbed or startled by a voice. Hello, sir. I looked back to find a very thin, worn out looking man. Looked like he had fallen on bad times. His Assam silk coat was open, and he sat down next to me and continued in a very friendly manner. So he asked me where I was from. Where are you from? I told him I'm from Ranchi. And do you come here often? So he said, not really. I just felt I needed a change of air, a little fresh air. He looked surprised at that and he said, fresh air? I've been coming here over the last few years and I've never felt any change. It's all the same. I just listened to him and he asked me who I was. I gave him a name, though it wasn't my own. And he seemed happy with that. And he continued and he said, so where are you staying? I pointed to the old house in front of me and said, there. I'll be staying there. And he looked a little surprised at that, but it didn't seem to ruffle him. And he continued. He said, let me tell you something about this house, what happened 10 years ago at this place. And he continued with his narrative. And he said there was this very well off trader, Bhushan Saha. This house belonged to him. And he had got this house along with a lot of other properties and things from his uncle who had passed away childless. So he was the only heir to all this property and he had taken on his uncle's mantle. He'd known it very well. He did very well. He was highly placed. He was a trader. He was extremely rich. He was well known in the circle of the sahibs. In fact, he could go into their offices with his shoes on. So they had that, same one to one kind of a rapport and relationship he had with the white men then. And on his personal front, he had a very, very beautiful wife at home. She was a stunning woman who looked not 1 year more than 16. Her youth and her beauty remained unfaded. She was a stunning woman. And Bhushan Saha being a very, very modern man, he was what you would call a modernized Bengali man. He took his wife away from the hordes of uncles and aunts he had. He had a huge family because he wanted to keep her only for himself. But at this point, the person who was talking to me, he told me that he was a headmaster, and he told me that he had his own ideas about the whole thing. And he said, "You're a married man, and you know that women who are really pampered and looked after like that, things don't really come to a good end because a normal woman, for instance, would like sour mangoes, and she would like to have a stern husband because that is where she gets to practice her womanly wiles, the qualities that have come down to women over the generations where she can manipulate her husband or she can fool him into doing things. Now, when a woman is given everything willingly by her husband, where she doesn't have to work for it, then she tends to take things for granted, and it loosens the bond that keeps husband and wife together. I listened to the man and he continued. So he said that he continued by saying that Bhushan Saha loved his wife. They didn't have children, but he lavished everything that he could on this woman. So she just had to ask for it and it would be there. So she had loads and loads of jewelry, beautiful jewelry, which kept increasing in amount. It was of complete, wealth by itself. She had it; it was all hers, and she would get her Dhaka silks without much persuasion. She just had to ask and he would get it. Bangles were there. Anything that she asked for, her husband would bring to her. He loved her. And she never had to ask for anything, which is why her beauty and her youth stayed with her because she never had to struggle for anything. But having said that, she looked after her house very well. She didn't believe in paying money unnecessarily to servants when she could do the work herself. So she did a lot of it herself. She maintained her house beautifully. She didn't believe in giving charity to poor Brahmins and feeding Brahmins because she was a very modern woman. So she said, why give her money unnecessarily? There's no need. So she managed everything in her house, but she was used to everything, including the loving caresses that her husband showered on her. She didn't have to ask for it, it was there for her taking. So when things were going on like this, and Bhushan Saha was a very, very successful businessman, as it often happens with businessmen, something went wrong in his business, and there was a time when he had to quickly rustle up some money to make sure that his value for credit in the market remained. So he had to get about 1.5 lakhs of money, and if he had to borrow this, get it as a loan from a stranger, it was known, as is known today as well, that you need to give a security deposit. And the only thing that he could think of at that moment was his wife's jewelry. She had lots and lots of it. But you must remember, here the headmaster who was relating the story to me stopped. He said, Bhushan Sahai was never in the habit of asking for things from his wife. He only gave. So it was very, very difficult for him to ask her for this. So any other man would have just gone up to her and said, look, we are in deep financial trouble. I need the money, but I can pull us through, but I need your jewelry. Instead, in a very, very awkward way, he went and requested his wife to part with her jewelry. At this, his wife, Mani, looked at him. Her expression changed, it hardened, and she didn't say a word. She was obviously not happy with it. And Bhushan went away very, very hurt and sad because he felt bad that his wife could, not trust him with something like this when keeping in mind everything that he did for her. But he was a man deeply in love with his wife, so it didn't anger him. He just felt sad, and he decided that he wouldn't force her for it because he was a modern man who believed that if a woman didn't want to part with her jewelry, her wealth, then the husband had no right to force that on her. She should part with it willingly. So he never asked her again. Instead, he left for Calcutta to try and raise the money by some other means. Now, when he left, his wife called a man she considered her counselor, her advisor. This was a cousin of hers who worked for her husband, and she called him up to ask him what was happening. And he told him told him that, look, my husband's asked me for my jewelry. What do I do? What would you advise? She asked him for everything, advice for everything. This man, Modu, as he called himself, told her that, look, I don't think your husband is going to raise the money in any way. So you're just going to lose your jewelry. So be a little wary about what you do. So he says, what do I do? She was stunned because to Mani, that was she considered her jewelry like a child because they didn't have children, and all the love that she had, she lavished on her jewelry, and she didn't want to part with it, not one piece. And she had loads and loads of it. So she said, what do I do? And he told her, why don't you go visit your father's house? Take the jewelry with you. So, and once things kind of calm down, you come back so you don't lose the jewelry. Now, he said this because he had an eye. He was hoping to get a big chunk of the jewelry himself. He was an unscrupulous man. And of course, the lady didn't know that. And so she said, yes, that's a good idea. I'll do that. So one rainy night, when there was a storm outside and the river was almost in spate, she decked herself with every bit of jewelry that she had. She preferred to wear it because she realized that taking it in a box would be very unsafe. And if she had it on herself, she would part with it only if she died. So she was very clear that this was the best way of taking it. So she was dressed from head to toe in her glittering jewelry, and she covered herself with a thick shawl. And covering herself well, she quickly went to the boat that was waiting with Modu and the boatman in it. And when she was getting in, he asked her, "Where's the box of jewelry? Give it to me." So she said, "I'll give it to you later. Let's start on the journey first." And she got into the boat, and the boat went down the river. Now, her husband, Bhushan Sahai, managed to get the money that he had gone to Calcutta for. He came back home after a few days and hoped that his wife felt a little ashamed for having suspected him in the first place, because he was deeply hurt. He would never have done anything to hurt her feelings. But when he came and when he knocked on the door, and then he found that nobody was answering it, he realized it was locked. He checked the house all around, and then finally he broke down the door and he went in to find that his wife hadn't been there for many days. So at first he thought, okay, maybe he knew that she'd gone to her father's house. When she had gone to her father's house, her cousin, the unscrupulous cousin who had asked her to go to her father's place in the first place, had called up and told Bhushan's steward, a faithful retainer of the house, that he was taking the mistress to her father's house. So when Bhushan had got to know this, he had felt very hurt, because he knew why his wife was leaving in the middle of the night like that before he got back. So, but he'd let it be, because as I told you, he was a very kind man and a man who was deeply in love with his wife. So he had let it be. So when he came back, he had thought that she would have come back from her father's house, but she hadn't. So he thought, okay, let it be, let her stay there for a few more days and come back, and then we'll sort things out. But his old steward, the one who was with him, the old Brahmin, who was the person who looked after things in the house, told him, no, I don't think that's a good idea. Send word to your wife's house and find out what the situation is and when she's coming back. So listening to him, Bhushan did as was told, only to receive a message from her very, very distraught father that neither his daughter nor Modu had come to their house. She had never reached her father's house. When he heard that, he was terrified. What had happened? People were sent to search all along the river. They searched even the water, everywhere, all the surrounding places, but nothing, no news about his wife or the cousin who had accompanied her. Broken-hearted, Bhushan Sahai used to spend almost every day, after a few days, every day at the window which overlooked the river, the ghat. He would sit there, and in the same room where his wife had left behind all the things that she had loved, all her bottles of perfume, even the betel nut case which was readied, the betel leaves are all ready. Now they were dry, they couldn't be eaten. Even the soap boxes that she liked were arranged, her lovely china set, everything, all these sets were arranged in her room, and everything, and the lamp that she lit up in the evening. He used to cry out aloud and say, "Come back, Mani, come back and light the lamp. I want you here. I miss you so much." So one evening when he was sitting by the window, it was the celebrations were going on. It was the birth of Lord Krishna. Festivities were going on outside, and he hadn't participated. He had just sat sadly at the window, and he waited until all the festivities stopped for the night, only to be resumed the next day. And while he was sitting there, when darkness fell outside, so dark that he couldn't see a thing, he heard a small sound. He paid attention to it, and then he realized it was a tinkle of jewelry. When a woman walks, when her bangles and her anklets, they make this lovely little jingling sound. That's what he heard. And he paid attention. It seemed to be coming from the ghat, up the stairs of the ghat. It came up, it stopped there. Then it walked towards his front door, which had been locked by his steward before he had left for the festivities. So it came and stopped there, and then he heard the sound of knocking on the door. It sounded like somebody wearing a lot of jewelry was knocking, So it was a knock along with the sound of tinkle of jewelry. He got up and rushed down the stairs. It was a big house, but by the time he got to the door, he tried opening it, but it was bolted from the outside. So he kept knocking on it wildly. And while he was knocking on it, all of a sudden his eyes opened and he realized that he had been dreaming. He was cold, he was in a sweat, but he was actually at the door. He had sleepwalked to the door, and he opened the door. He couldn't open the door, but he realized that something had happened which was not quite ordinary, and he knew that he had to do something about it. So the next day, when the festivities of the Krishna festival continued, he told his steward, "Leave the front door open when you go." He protested. The old man protested, saying there are a lot of thieves and robbers who visit these fairs, and if they come in, they may steal all the expensive things in your house. Master, don't do that. But he said, no, no, just listen as I say. You go for your festivities to celebrate the festival, but I want the door open. And so the servant obeyed as he said and left. He waited again. So again, when darkness fell and all festivities and all sounds stopped outside, he heard the jingle of ornaments again. He climbed up the stairs, came up, entered the front door, came up the stairs, and was soon on the threshold just outside the room where he waited. But he couldn't wait anymore. His anguish broke forth and he screamed in love, lost love. Money, come in, come in. What are you waiting for? And he rushed and opened the door only to find that there was nothing there, just a strong wind that was blowing in through the window. But he decided he had had enough. So the next day, he sent all his servants away. He said, I want to spend the night alone in the mansion. This day, I don't want you here. The servants thought that maybe he's involved in some kind of mystic rites where they couldn't be, participants, so they couldn't be witnesses, and they left. That day, he waited. The same sound came up the stairs, entered the front door, came in up to the threshold, and entered the room. He sat quietly. And he walked up to the cabinet where his wife had kept all her precious little curios and toiletries. And then, when he couldn't bear it any longer, he turned. When he turned, he realized that there was something standing near his chair, and he froze in horror. It was a skeleton, but a skeleton that was draped in ornaments from head to foot. There was a tiara on its bald skull. There were bangles on its hands, anklets, and gold and stone-studded necklaces around its skinny neck. And the only thing that was terrible about it was only the eyes were moist human eyes and the long lashes, the beautiful eyes of a woman. He couldn't scream and he couldn't close his eyes either. He kept staring at it, and with jeweled fingers, which were decked with rings, diamond rings, the skeleton beckoned to him, and as if in a trance, Bhushan Sahai followed the skeleton. It went down the stairs, went outside, and he could hear his bones knocking against the pebbles and the stones on the ground. It went up to the ghat, climbed down the stairs, and he followed right there. The minute his foot touched the icy cold water, he woke up and realized that he had had a dream again, but the skeleton was nowhere to be seen. The spectre was nowhere to be seen, and he was in the water. So he tried to move back. He stepped back, but he was half asleep and his reflexes weren't quite good. And even though he was a good swimmer, he fell into the water and the water carried him away, never to be found again. The headmaster finished his narration and looked at me and asked him, so do you believe what I told you? Do you believe in the story? So I asked him in turn, it's not me that you have to ask, do you believe in this story? I asked the headmaster. And the headmaster said, no, I don't, because I really don't think nature has time for all these, frivolous stories to write out novels. That's when I stopped him and I told him, the name I told you was not what it was. My name is Bhushan Sahai. He looked at me, but he wasn't hassled in the least. He looked at me and told me, I thought as much. When I saw you sitting here, I thought as much. And what is your wife's name? To which I looked at him and said, my wife's name was not Mani, it was Nitya Kali. And the story ends there. The Lost Jewels by Rabindranath Tagore. Yes, Deepti?
Yes. Poetry element.
How was the story? Yeah, I couldn't. In fact, there are so many little details in the story which is not possible to bring out in the narration, but I've tried my best and I hope you all like this story. Yes, now we move on to.
Almost, yeah. It was almost like a movie unfolding in right. Very nice.
Yes, so Deepti, let's have your story. Another one.
Yeah. So again, by a very, very famous, renowned author, uh, none other than Kamala Das, as she was known widely. She was known as Madhavi Kuti in Kerala, and she was an author, poet, and known very well all over the world. In fact, and she was also known as Kamala Suraya towards the end of her life. So And stories by Madhavi are always a favorite of mine. I have, loved her stories about Kerala, about her childhood, But this story, when I heard, I felt it was not the usual kind which we have heard of Madhavi Kuti. And it is more of a thriller genre, more of a dark theme again. So coincidentally, both our stories fall in the same category. Yeah. So here's the story. So one day, this lady, clad in a very beautiful yellow sari, well dressed, rightly so because she was going to attend an interview. Her husband had, told her, in fact, not to go. He was not very keen on her taking up this job. But they had offered quite a handsome amount as salary. They had offered 1,000 rupees, and it was in the textile industry anyway, so it was apt for ladies, she thought, and she was quite keen on attending the interview that day. She reached there. She stepped out of the auto, and she saw this huge building in front of her, and she walked in. As soon as she went inside, something did not feel right, and she was like, the very happiness itself faded off, and she was a little uncomfortable. And she saw many people around. It was quite crowded, and most of them were men. There was not one woman to be seen. But nevertheless, she had come for the interview. She thought she might as well attend it. She walked up, she looked around for a lift as her um, she was actually not aware of where exactly the office was, but she thought she would go, on her way she would ask someone. And she met one of the people out there, and one man, he looked at her, with a strange expression, which she was not very comfortable. He was actually weighing her up and down. And she asked him, where is the textile industry's office? He just looked at her, and he said, I think it's on the first floor. So she said, okay, and she entered the lift, and she went to the first floor. There, again, it was a long corridor with a lot of, many offices on both sides. She kept walking until she found another very weird looking man, a short, middle aged man who was coming up, walking up to her. And she asked him, do you know where the textile industry's office is? So he just gave a very, very sick looking smirk, one that had no respect for a woman, but would only look at her as, just was looking at her with lurking eyes. And she was not at all comfortable, and she was immediately regretting the fact that she had asked him. He said, no, I don't know, but I can take you, ask, let us go around asking someone. I can always show you someone who would know. Would you come with me? The question, the tone itself was not at all pleasing to her. So she said, no, thank you, I'll find out myself. So as she walked away, this man kept on looking at her. Somehow she just escaped his gaze, and she continued to walk, and she took a turn, and that there came another corridor, which was again very long, and she kept walking, and she couldn't see anyone on either side. It was when a board came to her notice. It was written dying, but the spelling was wrong. It was D-Y-I-N-G. And she laughed to herself. She's like, people just keep name boards just like that. But anyway, since, they are related to clothes, they might know. Let me go into the office and check. So when she tried, the door was open, and she went inside. And it was a long, it was a big hall, big reception kind of an area where there was a table, two chairs, and there was no one inside the room. And there was a fan running. So she presumed that someone would have just stepped out. Let me just sit down, because she was tired of walking up and, the strange gaze of that man, and she was exhausted. She was sitting on the chair. She sat down on the chair, and since the wind of the fan was right on top of her head, she just slipped off to a small nap. As she opened her eyes, she found a man, a stout, good looking, heavy built man, sitting in the chair opposite to her, pouring whiskey into his glass and mixing it with water and just preparing himself a drink. She was startled for a moment, and he smiled at her and he asked her, "Oh, how are you feeling now? You done sleeping? How was the nap?" She was like, she was a little taken aback, and she said, "Well, uh, you would know, right? I just wanted to check where the textile industry's office is. I'm sorry, I just fell asleep because I was so tired of walking." He said, "No, no, that's fine. Take your time. Get yourself together. There's no hurry. It's just 11:45. Don't worry." So she said, "No, no, I have to hurry. I have an interview, so I have to leave. I just thought that since your field is related, you are also into cloth dyeing, so that is why I thought I would ask you." And I found no one inside. That's why the reason why I sat down. So he said, "Okay, okay, no problem. Just rest. I'll tell you." And again, she said, "No, no, I have to go. So are you in any way related? Do you know this place?" He said, "What cloth dyeing are you talking about?" She said, "No, no, the board outside." I said, "Yeah, the board outside." He said, "No, it said dyeing." Yeah, so then he says, "Yeah, it said exactly what it meant. We, it is not the dyeing that you mean, it is actually dying in the real sense of the word. We allow people to die peacefully. We give them a very peaceful and a death which is the most beautiful thing in the world. I thought you wanted to experience that too. That is why you came in. You disappointed me." She was speechless. She did not know what to do. She sprang up from the chair and she said, "Wait, let me go. I don't know what your intention is, but I have to go." Then he started smiling and he spoke nothing more after that. He just kept on pouring his whiskey into his glass and sipping one drink after the other. She started to scream and shout and tell him, "I want to go, please let me go." And she was panting by the time she reached the door. And tired of all the screaming and everything, she fell down. She hit herself to the door and she fell down. The man smiled and said, "Why are you so worried? Don't worry. You know what? Have you ever experienced the smell of death? It smells like the feathers of a bird. Sometime back, I had a room and there was this glass door. A yellow bird used to come and sit there, the same color of your sari, the sari that you're wearing, the same yellow. She kept on pecking on the glass. She kept on hitting her head on the glass. And finally, like you, she also fell down and she died. That is the smell of death. And you know something? Death is the most beautiful thing. That is what I want you to experience. You are free from all your worries and you experience that kind of freedom and that kind of love nowhere else. So that is why I'm telling you that we sell death, the most beautiful thing of all. So she somehow, strangely, she smiled. She thought to herself, "He's talking to me, person who has experienced death in all its forms. My parents, for instance, my mom died a very, very painful death. Her death smelled of something like the rotten flesh that was there on her body, of the bed sores that she had because of being on the bed for a very long time. And my father, when he was in his deathbed, all I could smell was the fruit trees, the wind that would blow from the fruit trees outside, and it had the smell of fruits. And whatever I've experienced in my life, I have lost so many loved ones, and he's talking to me about the smell of death. And finally, he said, I have even come to visit you a couple of times when you had very, very severe jaundice. Remember when you were a child? All these talks, somehow at the end of it, she suddenly felt this is not done. I'm not going to let this man, you know, make me so worried and tense. And that itself, it's going to bring about my death. And I'm not going to let go so easily. I'm a strong woman. She stood up and she said, sorry, mister, whoever you are, I am not ready to die yet. I'm 27 years old. I have a husband. I have two children waiting for me at home. And I am not ready to die now. So please let me go, she said quite sternly. And surprisingly, the man let her go. He said, fine, the door is open, you can go. She opened the door, she stepped out, and she sighed a long sigh of relief. And she was proud of herself for standing up to the situation. And she thought, finally, no interview, nothing, let me get back home. She rushed to the very first lift that she saw. She rushed inside and she pushed the button. That is when she saw a huge board right on top of her head. Uh, The lift is under repair, danger. And then there was a flashing sign and darkness everywhere. This is the story called Smell of the Bird. Pakshiyudamana. That is the name of the story by Madhavipati, Malayalam short story. I hope you all enjoyed it.
It's one hell of a story, Deepthi. Seriously, I still have gooseflesh. Yes, what intense writing. It's beautiful, and she's one of the
Many of the
very, very well
minute
known.
details are too intense. I did not even bring it up because a lot of it is really, really intense for our to take it. Sometimes even for us, it becomes a little too much.
Yes,
So, so when you read it, it's a
but this was nice, a different
flavor.
flavor. Yeah, a different flavor, and that's what we're trying to bring out on Sugar and Spice, right?
Exactly.
Give everybody a taste of different kinds of stories. Some will tend to be a little more intense, some dark, some comical.
Yes,
And
and
so,
that is
yes,
why
so I do
adult
hope.
storytelling is sometimes so important because even we adults, sometimes those who don't really get to sit down and read a book, would for them it would be a good experience and of good taste of story, different kind of stories. They would be able to
Yes,
experience it.
absolutely. And you could always get back and read the story if you want to get the feel of reading, the
Exactly.
written work.
We
Yeah,
are,
so
yeah, that is one thing we would really love to if it would happen, that would be a really great thing that when people would really want to go back and read that book. That would be a great thing too, right, Shiva?
yes, definitely. And I hope when they do that, they do get back to us with their feedback. In fact, that's what we always say at the end of every story session that we have. Do give us your feedback. We'd love to listen from you and your suggestions. If any ideas, if you have any stories that you would like to share, please go ahead. Right, Deepthi?
Yes, yes. And so until next time, we will come up with another different stories. Until then, bye bye from Sugar and Spice. See you all.
Yes. Bye. See you. Take care. Stay safe.